Hello everyone and welcome to 5P Designs. Thanks for joining me as I work on my transition into fall mantle. The first part of that project is a quick DIY using Dollar Tree supplies. You see the green foam wreath there in the background and this fleece baby blanket. What I'm doing here is just measuring out how wide I need it to be to wrap around the wreath. So I'm cutting it with a rotary cutter and a mat, and I borrowed this from my mom to see if it would make the project easier, and let me tell you, it absolutely does. So this is on my wish list to purchase one for myself. If you don't have one, just use some scissors. They'll work. It just might take you a little bit longer. I'll end up needing 2 of these strips, so I'm just cutting those here, and then we'll begin the process of gluing. Both strips of material are cut, so the next step is I'm just going to hot glue them together. And hot glue actually works really well on fleece. You could of course sew, but I'm trying to make this project as easy as possible, so hot glue it is. Moving on to the next step, we will be gluing again. I do love my hot glue gun. We're just going to fold the material in half and end up making a big long tube in the end. All right, now things are getting a little crazy. I'm breaking out the knife and I am cutting my wreath in half. This method actually worked really well. Seems kind of silly. I guess you could have decided to just glue the material around the wreath while it was still intact, but actually I like this method. It worked out really well. So what I'll be doing is taking that tube that we made and just feeding it over that half of the wreath, and I'll just keep going. At some points it was a little tricky, but honestly it really wasn't that hard. So just keep feeding it through, and basically it's like making a little scrunchie. Now that the tube is fed over the wreath, we will be putting it back together. I used hot glue, not considering that it would melt the foam. Oops, I heard that sizzle sound and kind of freaked out a little bit, but it still worked, and I did put some tape around it just for a little reinforcement. I don't know if you really need to do that, but I did. And then I will be scooching the tube around the rest of the form and just turning the seam so that it's all on one side and you don't see it. Once I had everything scooched around to where I want it, I like to use that word scooch, it's a fun word. I took my hot glue gun and just repaired some parts that had come apart in the process. Really happy with how this little wreath turned out. And in this section you see me just playing around with the ribbon to figure out how I'm going to hang it. This ribbon is from AC Moore, as is that little window frame you see in the background, and that's what I'll be hanging the wreath on. And just looping it around and doing an overhand knot is how I will end up doing it, and you'll see that in the final pictures. This next project I got from the Daily DIYer. She's an excellent YouTuber who puts out a project every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so please go check her out for the full tutorial on this project. I'll put a link in the description box below so you can find it. The only difference in my project, I couldn't find the scarf that she used, but I did find the pot holders, so I just ripped the seam here and got that little piece of fabric and used that instead. So go check her out for the full tutorial. Project number 3, I will be making a garland to put across my mantle. I'm using the remainder of that same baby blanket, so I'll just one blanket for both projects, and cutting long strips, and then I'll be cutting these in half, and I'll be tying them on a jute cord. And I lost the footage of this, or maybe I didn't record it, I don't know. I had a bag of a bunch of like leftover pieces of jute, and I just tied them together so it kind of looks topsy-turvy and just really fun actually that way with all the different lengths. And it was a great way to use up materials because, as I always say, waste not, want not. So I'll just continue cutting here, and once I'm done, I'll start tying the pieces onto the jute. To attach the fleece to the jute, I will be using what's called a lark's head knot. So basically it's just making a loop and pulling the tail through, and it's like tying a little tie. Now begins the chaos. Basically, I just put things all over my living room and then start rearranging them until I like how it looks, but in the process, it looks kind of crazy. And the chaos is gone. Now I've got everything where I want it, so these are the results. There's the little pumpkin that we did, and the wreath that is now attached to the little window frame. The candlesticks, I actually got that idea from another YouTuber, and I'll link that below. The sign I made in a previous video as well. Also, the fox sign was made using chalk couture. The ceramic pumpkin I believe I got from AC Moore. You see our garland hanging. The pillow there is also another AC Moore clearance find, and I really love how everything turned out. So I call this a win.